Okay.
I'm with you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just the three of us.
There's three people that, there was a 60-foot piece of property that goes from the road to Gull Lake.
Yeah.
That was split into 20-foot wide things. Some years back, they wanted to raise it to 20,000.
Oh.
Talked them into the 20, saying you can't build on it, you can't put a dock on it. Now one of them came to me, showed me the first one I'm talking about.
Oh, okay. Okay. Can I start? Oh. Okay, we'll officially call to order the special city council meeting for the city of Nisswa on this Wednesday, April 16th, 2025. It says 2024 at 4:02 p.m. The first item on the agenda is the city of Nisswa audited financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2024. And Ryan Schmidt is here to present. Ryan?
Follow along with, but I have it for me if that helps. So I guess we'll just start walking us through. I like to start out with just a bit of a reminder on what exactly it is during audit and what's the audit. So just to recap at a really high level, audit consists of us in your financial records for the past year, and then we perform 2024. And these inquiries or these procedures consist of inquiries with people in the city, reviewing various reports from the state, looking at invoices, looking at all the supporting documentation. And then based on these procedures, providing an opinion on whether or not we feel that you're the opinion that we've given you this year is what's called an unmodified opinion. So you have a clean opinion. During the audit or after the audit, we also have to communicate with you. So if we had any difficulties during the audit as far as getting the information that we needed or people as far as transactions, this is where we let nothing along those lines to report to. Everything went very smoothly. We've got pretty standard estimates and pretty standard accounting policies that we noted for the city. The one new item this year is there was a new accounting standard during the year related to compensation. So basically that means employee use balance, and it doesn't impact the way that these are administered or run by the city. It's basically just because it's reported. So as a result, we didn't have to basically take a more conservative approach and report a larger liability to employee use balance. Part of the audit, we also look at your internal controls for the process and procedures.
Thank you. And we have a few internal control related matters to report, and they're the same three that we had last year. The first of these relates to audit adjustments. So as part of the audit process, we assist with certain year-end adjustments to basically get you from the cash basis of accounting that you run throughout the year to the accrual basis of accounting that's used for your liquor fund and your sewer fund. And because we assist with these year-end adjustments as part of the audit process, we have to note that in the reports and put a finding in there related to it, because you don't have a CPA on staff doing this for you. The other item here relates to a lack of proper segregation of duties. Basically, this is saying that because you only have so many people involved with the accounting procedures, you're not able to segregate all of the different accounting functions to the extent that's considered ideal. So we need to make you aware of that. We need to make the readers aware of that. and let you know that basically there's a little bit of extra risk when there's people who have access to the entire accounting system. And as a result, implement oversight and controls wherever you can. And then finally, we as a third party do prepare your financial statements on your behalf, and then that is considered to be an internal control finding because there's the heightened possibility that maybe a missing disclosure could occur or something along those lines. Sorry about that. Finally, as part of the audit process, we do review your compliance with Minnesota statutes. So the state actually gives us 5 or 6 checklists that relate to different Minnesota statutes, some of them relating to contracting and bidding. How do you go about obtaining and soliciting bids? Where do you keep your deposits and investments? How do you handle conflicts of interest? So on and so forth. So we review for your compliance with those statutes, and we did not find any instances of non-compliance this past year. Now from there, I've got graphs that show a trend analysis of numbers. So I'm not sure if it's gonna be pretty hard to go through them without you guys being able to see them. So I don't know if Jenny's making hard copies. All right. Okay, so if you flip in, it's the first page that says General Fund, Trend Analysis, and Budgetary Comparison. So it would be the first page that has a graph on it with numbers. So I'm going to start out by walking through the general fund, just a real big picture look for starters here, looking at the past 5 years, 2020 through 2024. Then we also have the 2024 budget on there as well. So really big picture look for starters here. Comparing to budget, you did have a few unusual items that occurred this year in the general fund, and I'll point these out and walk through them in the following pages here. But big picture, your revenues were quite close to budget. They were over budget by 134,000. Expenditures, on the other hand, were quite a bit larger, quite a bit in excess of budget by about 2.3 million. However, this was related to that land purchase that was financed via bond proceeds. So you can see down at the bottom where we actually have the 2024 numbers summarized in a table, the other sources and uses line, just under $2 million there. That's the net activity of your bond proceeds, and then also transfers out to other funds. So in aggregate, that kind of washes out with the excess expenditures, and you had budgeted for a decrease of about $37,000 in your fund balance for the year, and your actual decrease was about $216,000 for the year. Now the next 2 pages walk through this in a little more detail. Here we have the same revenues, and then the next page shows expenditures. Those same revenues and expenditures broken out into smaller categories. And once again, we have 2024, we have the prior year, 2023, and then also the 2024 budget on there as well. But looking at the revenues page, you can see the vast majority of your funding does come from property taxes for the general fund. And all the categories listed here are quite close to budget. I think the biggest difference here is interest income, just because you're pretty conservative with what you budget for your investment earnings.
Question on the intergovernmental piece, is that where you would park the revenues from or the profit from the liquor side of the city?
No, so the if you go to the previous page, there's the other sources and uses category down at the bottom. So I believe, what was it, 290,000 that got transferred from the liquor fund into the general fund? That falls into that other sources category. So that's not considered a revenue for the general fund. It's a transfer from the liquor fund.
Got it.
Yep, so that's netted into that area. Okay.
Though
Moving.
if I could, sometimes we do receive funding from the county. We do receive some funding from the state. So some of that could be repayment from the county for the roundabout project that was a little bit delayed, funding that came in, things like that. So.
Yep. It's basically payments from other governments, mostly the state, and then some county funding as well. I believe a lot of that grant funding for the projects that you talked about would fall into a different fund that we'll look at in a little bit here. Okay, next page, looking at expenditures. Same layout as the previous page, looking at smaller categories here. Most of them pretty close to budget. Obviously, the big one that stands out here is capital outlay. That would be where that land and property purchase fell, as well as some additional vehicle purchases that were in excess of your budget. But as I mentioned, you had the bond proceeds that financed that. The other item that stands out here a little bit would be your general government in the far left-hand side. Here you were about $157,000 over. Looked like it was mostly repairs and maintenance, engineering costs, etc. And the next page, still looking at just the general fund here. Here we look at your unassigned fund balance as a percentage of your annual budget. So this is a pretty commonly used ratio just to track where you want your fund balance to be at as the city grows and as your expenses increase. So you have a policy in place to keep this ratio at least 100%. So your unassigned fund balance, at least 100% of your annual budgeted expenses. And you can see it did drop off a little bit. Last year it was 170%. This year down to 143%. And that's basically a combined impact of your expenses increasing and then also your fund balance decreasing a bit. In the next page, we have just the cash balance for the general fund, but we have a little bit extra going on here. So I'll explain why we have these three different lines here. So the blue line that you see is just the general fund's cash. That's just the cash over the past 5 years. Now, with the projects that you've had going on in recent years, the general fund's been essentially fronting this cash and forwarding it to those funds. So then we have an amount that's due from those other funds as a reimbursement. And that would be the green line that you see there. So then in aggregate, if you look at those two in combination, you can see kind of where the general fund's cash is really at with that amount that's also due from other funds. And you can see that that's held pretty steady for the past 5 years. All right, with that, we'll move away from the general fund, take a quick look at some of your other more significant funds that have a little more activity this past year. Here we have your two project funds related to the Gull Lake Trail project and the County Road 77 Nokomis Roundabout. These are the two funds that I was referring to on the previous page that were being kind of front-ended by the general fund, and then those grant revenues came in as reimbursements. And that is what the revenues are made up of here in the blue bar there. That would be the grant funding coming in. Then a little bit of expenditures for wrapping up the project there in the Gull Lake. No expenditures in the current year for the roundabout project. And then the transfers from the general fund to basically close out the portion of the costs that weren't funded by grants. And overall, you had an increase in both of these fund balances. Gull Lake Trail about 1.8 million and about 1.2 million for the roundabout project. Next page, we have the same layout, looking at the debt service fund and then all of your non-major smaller funds kind of wrapped together there in aggregate. These are fully broken out into in the back of the financial statements if you want more detail. But debt service fund, here you have your property tax revenues of about $621,000, debt service principal and interest of about $584,000, overall an increase in fund balance of about $37,000 for the year. And your non-major funds, most of that activity there is made up of the fire fund, Parks and Rec, Community Center. Overall increase in fund balance there of about $66,000 for the year. And the next page here shows the cash for both of those categories over the past 5 years. You can see your debt service fund has been pretty steadily rising over the past 5 years, up about $37,000 this past year. And then your non-major governmental funds. The drop off in 2023, that was a fire truck purchase, but you can see it bounced back this year about up about $182,000 in the prior year. All right, that will move forward into your enterprise funds. Looking at your liquor fund here for starters, the graph focuses just on operations. So it's correlates to the operating revenues and operating expenses that are down in the table below. Comparing the liquor fund activity to the prior year, revenues were pretty steady, up about 124,000, and expenses were up about 46,000. Overall, you had operating income for the year of about 461,000. And then down under the non-operating section, within that non-operating expenses and transfers out, that's where that $290,000 transfer out to the general fund is showing up. So even after that transfer out to the general fund, you did have an increase in net position for the year of 157,000. And the next page, the same layout for the sewer fund. Once again, just doing a quick comparison to last year, revenues were up about $68,000 and operating expenses up about $53,000. So you had operating income for the year of about $76,000. And down under the non-operating section, that $410,000 that you see there of non-operating revenues, most of that is connection fees of about $373,000. So with that, you had an increase in the net position here of about $436,000 for the year. And then just like with the others, the next page shows the cash for these two funds over the past 5 years. Both of them pretty steadily increasing. And finally, I just have two more graphs here showing your projected future debt payments based on the debt that was outstanding at the end of the year. So this is not showing debt balances, this is showing the payments that are required going forward into the future. So on the first page here, we have your governmental fund debt, which is debt that's being financed by property taxes. So you can see after some final debt payments on a couple issuances get paid off in the next couple of years, and then that drops off fairly significantly. And based on what's currently outstanding, your debt would be paid off by 2040. And the next page has the same thing, but it's for your proprietary funds, which is basically your PFA loans in the sewer fund. And you can see that holds pretty steady also through 2040. Any questions?
Nothing.
Okay. Thank you.
Mayor Carnine, if I could, just always want to acknowledge Ryan and his team for being great partners to our audit and helpful to both Maggie and myself and various other staff that contributes to providing the information that they need. So thank you. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna move next to the 2026 budget discussion, but we're going a little bit out of order.
That's fine. We are going to reboot the computer.
Oh, okay.
So that's you, we can continue. We're just going to do that to see if we can't get the screen up. 'Cause
Okay.
that will be helpful. So. But yes, whatever order you would like to.
I think we were gonna start with fire.